Welcome everyone to the Gita in Action podcast. My name is Radha Priti, and I am here with a group of seekers who have become like my friends. It's the greetings this morning took a little bit longer. It's just fun catching up with you guys, hearing how you guys are doing and your spiritual insights. So I really appreciate doing life with you all. But what we do here is we read through the Bhagavad Gita, this ancient yogic text. We are in chapter 3 right now. And we share its relevance to our lives and our realizations. And we hold each other accountable as we go through in trying to imbibe some of this wisdom, to live some of this wisdom. We have this beautiful Gita Sangha chat now that we stay connected all through the week. And I feel so inspired reading all of the chats from you all and everybody encouraging each other and sharing different things that work for them. And it's been such a wonderful journey in Sangha and community. So if you want to join our community, you can email seekersquest108@gmail.com and I'll send you the links. You can also see us on Instagram at seekersquest108. And there's a lot of fun stuff in the bios there too. So with that, we will go ahead and start. We are on chapter 3, text 27. And chapter 3 is entitled Karma Yoga. So it's the yoga of detached action. And the section that we just got through, this little mini section, was where Krishna tells Arjuna that even if he's renounced from his actions, even if he's completely internally renounced, it's better to still work to set an example. And Krishna taught him that, kind of inspired him in that, saying that detached work is actually higher than renunciation, because Arjuna's trying to make this big decision, right? Whether he should fight or not fight. And if he doesn't fight, he's kind of renouncing, he's kind of walking away from his duties. And Krishna's telling him, hey, if you do that, people are going to see that. People that maybe aren't so renounced, don't have such a high consciousness, they're going to see that, and they're going to do the same thing. And because you're a warrior, you're a leader of society, you protect society. If that's a precedent that warriors see and they start doing, then it's going to lead to chaos. It's going to lead to our population won't be protected, right? The vulnerable will be exploited. So you need to keep this precedent that warriors fight, they protect, and in that you can be eternally renounced. And that's the highest, is setting that example. And in that, you'll be elevated, but also society will benefit, and you'll help elevate society as well by doing your duty. So that's the little section that we just finished. And now we are on the 27th text of chapter 3. I'll go ahead and share my screen. I share my screen from Vedabase, just a way that we can all kind of follow along and see the verse that we're on. So the 27th text says, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. So we're being introduced to a new concept here called the three modes of material nature, right? So this is what's actually carrying out our activities. And we'll talk about what that is a little bit. But the point is that we think that we're the doers. We think that it's all me. But really, we discredit how influenced we are by this subtle energy of the material modes. And this verse is a frequently quoted verse from the Gita. In this section already, we talked about, Krishna talked about detached work to set an example, like we just talked about, karma yoga. And then he also talked about attached work, where Arjuna's maybe fighting to obtain heavenly planets, to get a kingdom. And now, in that, Krishna told Arjuna that it's best to do it's his duty. It's best to fight. And he talks about this at various levels. He talks about his immediate welfare, to himself, work for yourself. You have to work to maintain yourself. And then he talks about the bigger picture, work to maintain cosmic order, right? Be in harmony with the cosmic arrangement. Work is a sacrifice. We talked a lot about sacrifice. And then he talked about work in a detached mood to set an example, like we just talked about. So that's what we just got through in chapter 3. That's kind of like a mini summary of how we've moved through chapter 3. Krishna kind of encouraging Arjuna to work for different reasons. As he's explaining the reasons, that consciousness is evolving, right? Work for your immediate welfare, work for others, work to set an example. right? So now this section, he's going to talk about why working with detachment won't entangle you. So he's going to give us a little bit more information about that. And this is something I love about the Bhagavad Gita, is it's so scientific, right? It really breaks down. It's not just saying like, oh, this is this. It like breaks everything down to its smallest piece and explains it for us in a way that we can understand and start to see it in our own lives. And in that, to me, it really helps to build faith. So this is a pretty cool concept that we're going to go over today, these modes. So this next 10 texts, he's going to talk about why working with detachment doesn't entangle you. So how we talked about how an attached person, a person who is attached to the fruits of their action, and a detached person can be doing the same thing. So on the outside, it looks like they're doing the same thing. The action is the same, but the detached person doesn't become entangled. And Krishna is going to tell us why this happens. And he's going to talk about the difference in consciousness between the detached and ignorant and the cognizant and detached, right? First, he's going to talk about the attached and the ignorant. That's what he's talking about now. And how Arjuna can stay free from this consciousness, and how from this he won't become entangled. Right? So right now he's talking in this verse when Krishna says, the spirit soul bewildered by the influence of false ego thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. He's first going to talk about the ignorant and attached. So in the last verse, 326, we talked about two levels of people. One is attached and ignorant, and the other is detached and wise. Right? And even though they're both acting, they're acting at different levels. So if both are working, what differentiates them? And we also talked in the last class about how a person, we talked about how a person who's unwise, so a person who hasn't had this realization yet, can't just jump up to the level of someone that is wise, right? It's a gradual process. It takes time, it takes realization, it takes experience, it takes engagement for them to obtain these realizations, right? It's not just something that can happen overnight, right? So we talked about that. And we talked about how being attached is and being ignorant is like the bottom level. And that's being elaborated in this verse. Krishna is saying when action is done, who is doing the action? Right? And this is the modes. This is the concept of the modes. The modes impel us to act. And we're going to give a brief overview of what the modes are, but just stick with me for a second, accepting that it's the modes that impel us to act, and the foolish person thinks I'm doing it. My false ego is thinking that I'm doing it. So with the modes are subtle forces that shape the interaction between matter and consciousness. Okay, so in layman's terms, we have the soul and the entire material world, where the soul's consciousness flows outwards towards this world, right? And this flow of consciousness is shaped by the modes. So the modes determine what a person will focus on in the material world. And everything, as we learn more about modes, and this is actually covered in chapter 14 extensively, and we'll really learn about it. But for now, we're just trying to understand the concept that the modes is actually what causes us to act, what causes the ignorant person to act. It's the modes and not us. You know, we think that I'm doing this, I have this desire, I am this. Really, it's these modes. It's this influence of material nature that we're being subjected to. And there's three different modes, right? And everything in this world is categorized by modes. You know, time of day is categorized by mode. Foods are categorized by modes. Personalities, makeups, all of these things are kind of categorized by modes. And once we understand what the modes are, and we learn to kind of see them interacting around us, and in that we can get more skilled at separating ourselves from them and kind of deciding, identifying, okay, I'm in this mode now. And then maybe identifying what it would take to get to a higher mode, a higher state of consciousness. Because that's what the three modes are. It's three states of consciousness as we go up in consciousness. And the bottom, well, actually, we'll start with the top, because why not? Let's start with the top. The top is called sattva. And it's characterized by calmness, clarity, knowledge. People that are in the sattva mood are, very reflective people. They're very intentional people. They're not so impulsive or reactive. They're maybe going to have a plan for this, and then they're going to execute this according to the plan, and they're just going to be very deliberate in that. they're they're very kind of controlled in that way. The Rajas, the next mode down in the ring of consciousness, Rajas is categorized by desire, restlessness, and activity. So think like Wall Street, like the streets of New York City. New York City is like a super Rajastic city, right? Everybody's like the city that never sleeps. Everybody has endless desires. The mood is like, work yourself into the ground basically, and then enjoy like crazy, right? It's super Rajastic there. And this is a mode I think that a lot of us can relate to. This is the mode of our culture, our society. We get into this like this mindset of always working, of having endless desires, right? This will make me happy. No, this will make me happy. We get very passionate. This is the mode of Rajas. And then the lower mode, the lowest mode, when the lowest mode of consciousness is called tamas. And this is the mode of lethargy, like we're tired, we're confused, there's a lot of resistance. If you're like in a cycle of addiction, you're in very tamastic mode. It's a lower level of consciousness, this mode. So the modes are like, we could think if it's like a train's going by and there's 3 adjacent seats. Oh, you know what? I want to explain this because I didn't before. If you're watching and you want to share something at any time, just use the little hand emoji to raise your hand. And then I know you want to talk, and then you can share with us. So you can do that anytime during this. And I also like to stop after each verse so that people can share anything that came up for them or their realizations around it. And if you don't know how to work the little hand, just like wave at me in your picture and hopefully I'll see you. Or even just come off mute and talk. That's great too. We love that. So back to the modes. Sorry, I forgot to say that at the beginning and I planned to. Anyway, back to the modes. So if we think of, we're all in a train, there's 3 people in a train and there's 3 windows in the train. The train is moving. The train is moving past some greenery. And the first person in the train looks over and he sees a tree and he wants to go sit under the tree and read a book. And the other person, the second person, through his window, he's looking at the greenery and he's reminded of a romantic movie and he's wishing that someone was with him, there with him, and that he could enjoy with that person. And then the third person is looking out the window and he's just feeling super tired and lethargic. He sees the greenery and he wants to sleep. Right? So the point is that all 3 people are seeing the same thing, but they're perceiving it very differently. And the Gita says this is because of the 3 modes. So the 3 modes is like our lens, like our glasses. You hear like rose-colored glasses, right? This is like our glasses of which we see the world around us. And this impacts so many things. And it's not just the way that we perceive the world around us, but it's also the way that we pursue the world around us, right? So we can think of rose-colored glasses for like how we perceive. And then when we talk about pursue, we can think about like puppets on a string, right? Like we like to feel like we're in complete control. But the reality is we're so influenced by these modes that we become like puppets on a string. Like if you think of like an addict, they have no control. They're completely consumed by this tamastic mode. And then they're like a puppet on a string. So the modes affect both the way we perceive and the way we pursue the world around us. And Andrew Armar, please share with us.
Actually, I was having a big conversation about this with my friend Tom at 6 o'clock this morning about the modes of fruit of our labors and the modes, that exact subject.
Crazy.
Part of it was in the fact that it's okay to not pursue the fruit of our labors, but it's okay to feel like someone is not treating you properly if they, don't reward you properly. But I was telling him the mode of how you react to that is the difference. Are you doing it because you are wanting a reward on top of the reward for the last thing you were doing, or are you wanting to do it to bring it to their attention that they've done something? When someone does a wrong to you, that mode also matters on how you react.
Yes, that's so beautiful. Like they could be acting out of rajas. They could be acting out of passion. Like if you're in a business relationship or something, and that person is kind of not being super, it's not being super accountable and is not really holding up their side of the bargain. They could be very rajastic, and you could choose to handle that in a very sattvic way, a very reflective, a very not so impulsive. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I was trying to explain to him was, okay, if you don't get this X amount of money bonus or whatever because you did this work, when you approach them about it, don't be about it like, I want this money now. Be it as in the future, whenever something like this occurs, you need to take this into account next time
Yeah.
because you could affect other people in a negative way. Not, you did not do this for me.
Yeah, and this is a perfect example of how once we understand the modes, we can kind of separate ourselves from them and use them to better navigate life in a way that's going to upgrade us. This is perfect. You see your friend, this interaction, you can identify, okay, they're acting out of rajas. I'm going to remove myself from that. I'm not going to take it personally. I see that they're influenced by this mode. I'm going to act in this mode. And in that way, you're removing both your friend from that, and that you're not taking it personal, and they are also being more deliberate in how you show up. And that doesn't mean excusing their behavior. Like you said, it doesn't mean excusing their behavior, but it does mean being more conscious about what you're perceiving and the mode that it's in, and then also how you're going to show up, how you're going to pursue that. Yeah.
And that's
Perfect.
intention.
Yeah.
And it's bringing attention to the moment of every word. When the person's having a conversation with you, bringing attention to what they're saying, how they're saying it, how it affects them, and not just wait to respond. Like me and you having a conversation. If I'm just sitting here listening to what you're saying, just waiting to say something back to you, I'm not, my intentions aren't to listen to you.
Yeah. That would be a
And
rajasic intention. Yeah.
exactly. So
When sattva would be
I just,
listening
that,
calmly and
it just, I just had to bring that up because it's just amazing that I was just having this conversation 2 hours ago. This
yeah.
exact conversation.
It's so funny too, because Todd actually texted me something this morning. I said, we are going to talk about that today. I'm going to share this text message. Be careful what you share with me because I'll share it online. But anyway, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so the broad point, and this is where we're getting right now, this is such a nice share at this time. The broad point is that each of us needs to find out how best we can function within the framework of which we are being pushed by the modes. Right? So observe your tendencies and align your actions with your natural strengths and inclinations. Okay, so a lot of us, I know I'm very rajastic. I have a lot of desires. I like to go. I could be passionate. I can be driven. These aren't bad things. This isn't a bad thing. It's how we use it, right? Where am I applying that energy? I have this subtle form of nature. This is how it's affecting me. Now, where am I applying it? What am I doing with that? Right? So if you're sattva, if you're peaceful and intellectual, choose a career or lifestyle that aligns with those traits. Right? And in that way, we can utilize these modes. These modes we can use to upgrade ourselves, right? And we're also probably not just one, right? You're probably not just like completely rajastic. You might have some sattvic tendencies. And you'll also see this change as you go through life, different phases of your life, different things that you're involved in, different realizations that you have. So this is not linear. It's not like black and white. It's very much like it's a flow. It's dynamic. And I think different things can be happening simultaneously and from different angles and all of that. So there's a lot going on here. But the other thing, and this is a huge point from this verse that we need to understand, is that these modes help us understand that I'm not the doer, right? We should understand that we're being pushed by the modes in a certain way. And this was just this conversation that I just had with Armor is perfect for this, because we're seeing, if he's taking offense from what his friend is doing, he's thinking that it's his friend that's doing it. And it's the mode that is influencing his friend. And again, that doesn't mean that we excuse his friend's behavior, but it helps us to not hold his friend so tight to that in a way that we maybe become judgmental or we, stick some kind of, we take it so personal. We take it to mean something about ourselves. They're treating me like this, so they must think that I'm this, No, really, it's just the mode that's affecting them. I had, this is when I was making this class, I was thinking my daughter was sick yesterday. I have a 6-week-old newborn. And it's like a big deal when they get sick, because if they get a fever, it can be bad. So she had a cold and I took her to the doctor. Luckily, it's just a cold. She's not going to get a fever. It was all good. But before I did that, I was like really concerned. And her nose is so stuffy that I'm holding her and she's breathing like, and every time I hear her breathe, I'm like just angry. It's just like angry. I'm realizing how much anger I have inside of myself. And I'm angry because I'm so used to being able to like solve every problem and I can't do anything about it, right? I can't do anything about it. She's influenced by this tamastic mode. I'm in this rajastic mode. I want to do something about it and I can't. Right. And I'm just thinking like, wow, this whole, I feel like this, I'm not the doer mentality. I've got to a point where like I have some pretty solid realizations around it for myself. But now I have a child, and to understand that I'm not the doer for my child, it's like, it's so confronting, right? It's like I was literally angry all day yesterday because I couldn't do anything about this. So, but this is what we have to understand, these forces outside of us are affecting us and the people around us. And we're not the doer. We don't have all this full control over it. And this is why, right? And the other thing here is if a person in a certain mode feels proud, like a person who's really rajasic and who's a high achiever and achieves a lot, that won't be effective. Right? Some people will naturally be more reflective and some people will naturally be more active, right? And if you're feeling calm and reflective, it's the influence of sattva, right? If you're restless and driven to act, it's the influence of rajas. And if you're lethargic, it's tamastic. But none of these things are actually you. It's just the mode that you're being influenced by at the given time. And it's not you. So we don't need to be proud of it. We don't need to feel like a failure. We have to just accept that this is the influence of material nature. And this is what reduces over-identification with success or failure. And the other thing this helps us do is let go of the ego-driven attachment, right? The ego likes to claim I achieved this or I failed this, right? And in this, we have to recognize that there's many factors beyond your control. Upbringing, environment, external circumstances, cold, viruses, right? These things are completely out of our control, and they're going to impact us. And we have to be able to step away from this and understand this, or we're going to suffer, right? And this helps us to stay grounded. This helps us to not get overly proud in success or disheartened by failure, right? Because if you have a lot of success, understand you're influenced by the mode of passion, and that can be a good thing if you're using it for good. But what you need to understand is that it's not you, right? This energy you have, this ambition, this focus, this drive, that's a mode of material nature, and it's not you, right? So in this, we can focus on our effort, not ownership, understanding that it's not me. This is a mode I'm influenced by. I'm just going to focus on my effort. Where am I going to even direct this energy? Right? We act sincerely, but we detach from the idea that I'm the sole cause. So these modes are our conditionings. These modes are our conditionings. We all have certain conditionings that we live with, right? And while we are functioning with our conditionings, how do we move forward? Right? Rather than becoming proud, we recognize that the conditionings are pulling us. Let us move in a direction that is constructive and not destructive, right? Again, so it's not about what you have. It's not about what you got. It's about what you do with what you got, right? Not about what you got, what you do with what you got. So if somebody is really reflective, be reflective in a constructive way, right? Think issues through, arrive at deeper insights, right? Don't be reflective in a destructive way, right? Overanalyzing, becoming overly critical, right? Recognize where we're using the mode in a way to elevate our consciousness and in a way to bring it back down. And this is what's important, right? Not where we are, but where we're going. So if somebody's active, use that in a constructive way. Use the energy for something valuable, right? Don't be running around without planning, without vision, starting, making things worse. Be really intentional in that. Use the energy for something valuable. And if somebody is lethargic, acknowledge that you're lethargic, that this is the way things are, and function without limitations. right? And I mean, and function within those limitations. Don't be destructive in deciding that you can't do anything and then just just spiral out of control. We can sometimes be in a tamasic mode, like if we have a lot of health issues, right? And they're limiting us and we're on a lot of medication and we're just in a really kind of lethargic state, right? We have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that's where we are, function within those limitations, but don't let it bring you lower. Don't get so caught up in I can't do anything. I'm so unhappy about this and spiral into lower states of consciousness, right? So we have to acknowledge the particular kind of program that's inside of us, right? And our programming will determine what we prioritize and what we deprioritize, right? So example, if there's a fire in a theater, some people may freeze, some people may flee, just completely run out. Someone else could focus and think and plan what to do, right? So these modes shape the interaction mechanism between us and the outer world. Denny just asked a question. Let me read this question. What about overturning situations? Oh, overthinking. Yeah, overthinking can be very rajasic, right? Thinking is good, but if we're overthinking, we can really get into a rajasic mode, and that can be destructive. So yeah, we have to be careful there. But just identifying these, now we kind of have a tool in our toolbox of which to analyze what's going on around us and inside of us in a way that we can create space, right? We talked about that so much with creating space between I'm not the body, I am not the mind, right? That in itself helps us accept whatever's going on and not identify with it in a way that we become stuck, right? Because we can't admit that, we handled this situation poorly because we're making it mean something about ourselves that it really doesn't, right? So now we have another tool in our toolbox it doesn't mean anything about ourselves because it's really not us. It's these modes of material nature and they're influencing us. And again, this doesn't exude us from the responsibility, but it helps us to understand and to kind of connect with what's going on so that we can have some influence over it, right? So Krishna is telling Arjuna that everyone will be pulled by the modes and act in a particular way, right? Those that are aware of that and direct the action constructively, they won't claim false credit for what they've done, and they'll be elevated. And those that think they are the doer, this is the big thing in this verse, thinking that you're the doer and claiming false credit, you'll become entangled. So we need to understand that it's these modes and that it's not us, because thinking that it's us is a recipe for disaster, right? Like if we are thinking that it's me, we're soon going to be confronted with the reality that it's not. Right? My mom was just here this weekend. But I hope my mom doesn't mind me sharing this. She's probably like, oh no, what is she going to share? My mom ate so healthy my whole life, like insanely healthy. And then my mom had this health issue and she almost went blind in an eye. And for no reason, it just like happened to her. And I noticed when she's at my house now, she's not eating so healthy. And I'm like, Mom, why aren't you eating so healthy anymore? She's like, well, I just thought I was eating so healthy. I thought I had total control over my health. And then this happened to me. And I'm like, I don't. So now I just enjoy a little bit more. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. And not to say that we shouldn't eat healthy because it's still good to eat healthy. There's benefits, but these realizations these things that happen to us in our lives will teach us this. We are not the doer. We don't have total control over everything like we like to think that we do. And if we can't realize that now, life will teach us that. Some of these things are just out of our control. So Krishna is telling Arjuna that everyone will be pulled by the modes and act in a particular way. Oh, I just said that. So those that think they're the doer and claim the false credit, they'll become entangled. If we don't take credit, if we can understand that this isn't me and we don't take credit, that this is the way that my mind, body, machine works, this is the way that I function, then we won't become entangled. And when we become entangled, that's when it gets dangerous for us, right? When we're not entangled, we can become detached, which doesn't mean not loving, which doesn't mean cold-hearted, but it means we're not so personally invested in what's going on around us. And in that, we're able to be more selfless, more loving, even more perceptive, right, to the reality, right? When we're not so engrossed in the fruits of what's happening around us. So we can't wish away our conditioning, but what we can do is distance ourselves from it. And that's what's going to be explained in the next verse, right? We cannot control that which is controlling you. The modes are controlling us. We can't necessarily control them. When you're influenced by the modes, you're thinking that you're the modes, right? And you can't control them. But we can distance ourselves from them. And there's some empowerment in that. And we'll talk about that in the next verse. Does anybody want to share anything before we move on to the next verse?
Hi, sorry, I couldn't raise my hand.
Yes, Katie.
Hello, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you because um my, despite the holidays being over, the time where a bunch of family are getting together is kind of like right now for me, for my dad's 80th birthday on Sunday. And anyway, and that just a reminder that the people around us are their modes, not, and to remember who they truly are was just so well timed and such a good reminder. And I think it's going to be helpful over the next like 5 days. So thank you so much.
Yeah. That can be so powerful, even in like forgiveness. I had an experience with a friend who I was kind of doing business with. And the way they were doing it, it was not planned. It was not organized. It was just like throwing themselves into it. And in that, I felt there was like no consideration for me. They didn't really live up to their side of the bargain. I struggled. I took it so personally. I had a close relationship with this person, and it wasn't even about the money for me. It was just about like, I had a close relationship with you, and I feel like you are completely like just negligent. Like this is just. And I read this book called Dark Night of the Soul by Sarman Haas. It's so good. But it talked about the modes in lots of different ways. And one of them was how a person in business conducts themselves according to the different modes. And this helped me to see like, oh, this person is just completely overcome in this Rajasic energy. This isn't about me. They're just so overcome in this Rajasic energy. I'm taking it personally. I need to just step away from this and accept this person for who they are and where they are and not make it mean anything about me. And it was so helpful for me to kind of let go of some of that resentment I had for them because I was able to see it like that. And it doesn't mean, like Armor said, it doesn't mean that I'm going to keep engaging in a business relationship with that person. It doesn't mean that they're not accountable, but we can at least take the personal element out of it, see it for what it is, accept it, and then make decisions about it based off what's best for our own growth and elevation. So thanks, Katie.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, I totally agree with that. It's like I've always heard, give the benefit of the doubt and, to forgive. And I always try and practice that in my life. And then like hearing this aspect like brings a whole nother level of being able to like forgive and give the benefit of the doubt, of understanding the modes. Like I've always heard about the modes, but hearing it in this way to detach yourself, like, because I totally get into that negative thinking sometimes too, like especially right now during winter, I'm oversleeping. Like I have a tendency to oversleep. Like I'm a heavy kappa person, and it's such a kappa time. And like I'll wake up and I'll like get in this mood of like, oh, you're so ignorant. You're in the mode of ignorance, and I use it to attack myself. And now I could like totally detach from it and be like, oh yeah, okay, like it's okay. Like this mode is influencing you. Okay, do something to sort of counteract it. Function within your limitations. Like I love that. And I'm just like, I don't know, I'm overjoyed with this right now. So
yeah. Yay. It's so beautiful. It's so liberating, right?
Yeah.
Like
a whole new level of just letting it go, and processing where you're at. So thank you.
Yeah. I agree. I feel the same way. It is nice. You're not your body, you're not your mind. And if you're being impacted by material nature, this is how, this is why, and this is what you can do about it. That's what we're getting into here. Thank you.
I do have a question.
Yes. Is this Todd?
This is Todd, yeah.
Let me find you.
So,
I like to look at the person when you talk. Let's see. Where are you? Oh, okay. I see you. Please share.
I'm just wondering, it seems like people have like a natural energetic flow to them. like as individuals. So some people might be physical, like naturally physical, and other people might be naturally intellectual. This is like a different energy. So I'm wondering if that baseline has something to do with our individual souls or not. And then my second question, I guess, is if these modes are influenced by conditioning, do we want to just condition ourselves to be at that highest level, basically? Like if that, like just play the, this is what's going to happen, like this is how it's influenced. So we just condition, try and condition ourselves to be at that highest level, or is that, or am I thinking this wrong or something?
No, we are going to talk about that. That's the gradual elevation. So yes, we are going to talk about that. And the first question, okay, our souls are not covered by the modes. Our souls are spiritual. Our mind, our body, and the material world are covered by the modes, right? And in that, to your point, exactly, we do want to elevate the mind, body, vehicle so that it can influence the soul in a way that's more conducive to connection with divinity. But the soul itself it's part and parcel of God. It's a spiritual spark of divinity. It cannot be influenced. It cannot be influenced by the modes, but the mind does condition the soul. The soul has this need for connection, and the mind confuses material world around it for what will fulfill the soul. And because the mind is influenced, the mind is controlled by material nature, and it influences the soul. That's how that interacts. And that's why it's important for us to try to elevate this mind body vehicle so that we can kind of uncover the conditioning of the soul that gets on it because of this mind body vehicle, and step into our true nature, our true identity. And we're going to talk right about that, exactly about this elevation, this gradual elevation that can take place as we see. And this is Todd, Todd actually messaged me this morning, and he said, you know, I've been thinking a lot about my relationship with work and how hard I work, and I'm thinking that I need to have more fun. And I said, yes, what are we working for? It always comes down to what are we working for? So Todd here is identifying that he's in this rajasic mode, this mode of desire, this mode of work, work, work. And at the end of the day, it's what are we doing with this? Where are we going with this? Right. And when we're as spiritualists, when we talk about fun, we talk about going to a kirtan, we talk about connecting with like-minded individuals, right? We need to be doing more of those things that are bringing us up to a mode of sattva, right? Not in this mode of rajasic, not this mode of like, I have constant desires that I need to fulfill, and I need to work, and I need to, you know, we have to balance that a little bit. So in that, you know, that's the process of this gradual elevation. If we're in a rajasic mode and we're in this New York City mode of I need to work, 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 we'll gradually get realizations that, you know, maybe these things that I'm working so hard for aren't really fulfilling to me, aren't really fulfilling my heart, my soul. And in that, we'll elevate our consciousness. We'll get closer to the mode of sattva, where we don't need to have all of these things around us. We don't need to constantly be entertained and spend money on entertainment and, you know, all these things that we think will make us happy, like we talked about. It's contact with the material world, and we'll understand where true happiness exists. And in that, just like you're realizing with your relationship with work, you know, maybe it's not making me so happy. Okay, so this is an opportunity for growth for you. You know, how can you move a little bit more towards a sattvic nature, towards being content, right? That's very sattva. We're just content. We don't need to constantly go, do. We're just content, right? And in understanding that contentment exists, it's not false. It's not something that can be faked, but it's a product of that connection with source. And that's where we become content. And that's the sattva gun. That's the sattva mode, is a mode of contentment. So you'll get there through your realizations. Does that answer your questions?
Yes. I guess so. The soul has no influence on energy.
The soul itself is consciousness. The mind influences the soul. So it's not, the modes are not coming from the soul, because the soul is spiritual and the modes are material. So that what's happening is the mind is influencing the soul, and that's why it's covered. And the mind is influenced by these material gunas because it is material. The mind and the body, it's the vehicle. It's what the soul is being moved around in, right? Is the mind and the body. The soul is inside that package, right? It's inside of that vehicle. And that's in itself is material, but the soul itself is spiritual. So no, it's this, the soul is not the nature. But what you're thinking is right. What you're thinking is that you're noticing that some people are more active and some people are more reflective. You know, maybe you have people that like desk work and they do not like to be active at all. And they're just very thoughtful. They're very reflective. They have more of a sattva nature. But that also doesn't mean that they're engaging that sattvic nature in a way that's gonna upgrade their consciousness. You know, you can have a sattvic nature and you can just be using it in a way that's not really benefiting you spiritually. But you are recognizing that we have that makeup. You know, and that's when we talk about like Arjuna was a Kshatriya, that's a very rajasic mode, right? That's a very rajasic nature. He's a fighter, he's a protector, he's very active. That's rajasic. How's he going to use that to upgrade his consciousness and to upgrade society and make elevation in his consciousness? But that's a product of the mind, right? That's his mind. His mind is very rajasic. A Brahmana, like that's the top, you know, they're more studious. They're like the teachers, right? So they're just more calm. They're more reflective. They're more sattvic. That's their nature. But again, just because it's your nature doesn't mean that you're going to use it in a way that is constructive. And that's a whole nother thing. But you are recognizing that we are all born in these bodies and they're all kind of made for different things. You know, like a car, like there's different cars. You have like a Hummer, you have like a sports car, you know, they're made for different things. Doesn't mean that that's what they're necessarily going to be used for, but they are made for different things. And they and in that they have different levels. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's
Yeah, I
very,
guess I'll just have to look at like at some other point, I'll look at what are the qualities of the soul, or like what things like that.
The qualities of the soul, my friend, are in chapter 2. What is that? The first, I think it's 11 through 30. You can read about the qualities of the soul. Maybe you weren't with us for that when we learned about all the qualities of the soul. That's beautiful though. And that's also in the Gita. And you can also go back and listen. But the soul is its own thing. And the problem with the soul is that it gets covered. It gets covered by material conditioning. And in that's what this journey through life is that uncovering of all of this. But the soul is itself spiritual consciousness. It's influenced by the vehicle that it's in. And that's why we have to care for this vehicle, because it so heavily influences the soul.
Thank you. Yeah, I get it. And I get this part that we're talking about. I get it. Thank you.
Great. Trevor, please share with us.
I just had something real quick, like a tip before I head out. I was going to talk a little bit about taking things personally, because it's hard not to do at times. We have our good days, we have our bad days, and it all depends on, circumstance, really, time and circumstance. So the easiest tip that I heard a motivational speaker say is, the way people treat you has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. So you don't know you have no idea what that person's going through, nor do they know what you're going through. But most people don't have access to what we do. And we're all on different levels and have different modes affecting us at different times accordingly to those levels of consciousness and so on. So
yes.
So don't take it so personal. Just keep going about your day emanate the vibration that you're carrying. Bring something to the table that might inspire someone or lift someone out of their funk, instead of being so susceptible to the lower frequencies that are overflowing all around us.
Yes. What a beautiful practical link you just made there. Yeah, that how people treat you has nothing to do with you. Yeah, it's so oftentimes we make it mean something about us, and it really does. And the Gita is telling us why. They're influenced by the modes, and it's not you. And in the same way, you're influenced by the modes. The way you're perceiving this and what you're doing about it is the modes. So yeah, it gives us kind of this space, this distance that we can be a little bit more skillful in how we navigate and how we approach, and also more what's that word, resilient in our recovery, right? Okay, I messed that up. Maybe I didn't do that right. Okay, how can I show up in a higher mode? I maybe was too rajasic there. I was leaning too much into rajas, or maybe a little bit tamastic. How can I upgrade? How can I make the next decision to be in a little bit higher of a mode? And we'll get so much into modes in the 14th chapter, but we'll really learn about what they are and how they show up in all different kinds of things, which is so interesting, because I think it starts to change the framework of which you see the world around you when you understand how the modes impact, how a business person shows up, how a person in a relationship acts, how, the foods that you eat, the impact on your body, the times of the day, the activities that you like to do, right? So it's really we're so blessed to have this knowledge. It's really helpful. I think it's really helpful. Gives you a framework of which to see and navigate the world around you. Does anybody else want to share anything? Mariah says, in scripture, I understand the soul's qualities are always blissful, full of knowledge, eternal, and in connection with source. Yep, that's it. Sat Chit Ananda is what we say in Sanskrit. And yeah, now Todd, after we hang up, I'm going to be sending you those classes where we talked about the soul's qualities, because it's so important to understand the soul, because that is what we actually are, right? The soul is what we actually are at our essence. And the soul is covered by these material conditionings. And it's not the soul, the consciousness, it's not the soul, but it's these conditionings that it comes into contact with that influence it. But that's our true nature. That's Sat Chit Ananda, full of knowledge, full of bliss, eternal. That's our true nature. That's what we need to understand. The mind body vehicle is not, right? And there's so many tools. There's so many spiritual tools that we can try to, optimize that mind body vehicle so that it impacts the soul in a way that's going to elevate us and bring us closer to source. Okay, should we do one more? Unless anybody wants to share anything. Okay, let's see if we can get through this one more. So 28. 28 says, one who is in knowledge, make sure you can see it on my screen. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O mighty arm, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work and devotion and work for fruitive results. Okay, so in 327, Krishna talked about the ignorant person, the mindset that I am the doer. That's the ignorant person. Here, Krishna is talking about the opposite, when that person is cognizant, right? They're the knower of the truth. So again, we have the soul, the mind, the body, and the world, right? The person understands, this wise person understands that everything other than the soul is subjected to the modes, right? The mind, the body, and the world, like we talked about earlier. So the mind, body, machine is subjected to the modes. This person understands that in the material domain, the mind, body, world, that's the material domain, that this is the arena of the modes, and therefore this person doesn't get affected by them. Right? So a wise person doesn't get affected by them because they understand that it's just the modes. and that they're different than all this. So they're not going to react emotionally or attach to an outcome. Right? If someone criticizes you, instead of taking it personally, which is an ego-driven reaction, you realize that their words come from their natures, and this helps you respond calmly rather than escalating the situation. Exactly what Armor said earlier. So if we consider a reflective person and an active person, like we talked about, a reflective person, we call them a Brahmana. They're like the teachers. They're full of knowledge. They're very calm, collected. The active person is the Kshatriya. It's like Arjuna, the warrior, the fighter. Activeness and reflectiveness are the results of modes. And if the person recognizes that because they are the results of the modes, they won't be affected, right? So it's like, say that there's a person walking, a person cycling, a person driving, a person piloting a plane, right? Naturally, there'll be different speeds at which the person is moving. There's no reason for a person who's piloting the plane to be prouder that they're going faster than the person that is driving, right? Because the speed is driven by the instrument and not the person, right? So like if I'm in a plane and my mom's in a car, I'm not like proud that I'm getting there faster because I'm in a plane and she's in a car. It's like, that's not me. That's the vehicle that we're in. And we can easily see that, right? That's so easy for us to see in this material. We're not going to get in like a, I'm not going to be like, I'm better than you, Mom, because I'm in a plane and you're in a car. It's like, so we have to understand that that's the same way. We're in these material bodies and they have different modes, and that's just what we're given, right? And there's no need to become proud of it. There's no need to say, oh, I could do all these, or I'm more reflective. And this is just our mind material machine, right? And it operates according to its own modes. So we don't become attached to that, and therefore we don't become entangled. Because today a person is flying a plane, but tomorrow they may not be, right? They may be riding a bike tomorrow. And in that, will they be discouraged, right? No, these are the modes. Whatever machine they have, they work with it. And that's what we need to do with our bodies, right? What we can control, we need to go in the correct direction, right? So if you're in a plane, or you're in a car, or you're riding a bike, we need to be going the correct direction. That's what we need to focus on. And that's what the point is here. Whatever machine we have, use it to go in the correct direction. A wise person understands not to become attached to the mind, body, machine. And in that doesn't become proud or resentful, but instead utilizes it objectively, right? This is what I have. This is what I got. I'm going to go in the right direction. And to Todd's point, if we're going in the right direction, we're going to naturally upgrade. We may be on a bike. Okay, if we're going in the right direction, we're gonna get in a car at some point. We're gonna upgrade if we're going in that right direction, because that is the ultimate goal. But at the same time, recognize what you have, engage it to its specific strengths and natures. And we'll get that realization where we can gradually be elevated, like we talked about in verse 26, right? You have the wise person, the unwise person, and the difference between the two is a gradual elevation. You can't just jump up. You can't just say, okay, I have a very active nature and take a desk job and be happy, right? We have to work to our natures. And then as we get these realizations, then we can upgrade our vehicles will upgrade naturally. We don't even have to worry about it, actually. You'll just see, okay, well, whereas I used to like to wake up at 4 a.m. and work out until I couldn't walk anymore, now I like to wake up at 4 a.m. and meditate. And that is what's really fulfilling to my soul. You'll see that happen to you, right? All of this helps us. So what this does for us, it helps us cultivate neutrality and align with our higher selves, right? So when we're feeling angry, instead of acting impulsively, we acknowledge this is Rajas influencing me. Like yesterday when my daughter was sick and I'm so angry, this is Rajas influencing me. Instead of acting impulsively, and taking it out on my husband, which I also did and had to apologize for. Side note. We see, where we're angry, and what we can do about it. So this awareness helps us manage our response. It brings calmness. Recognizing the gunas helps us act from a place of wisdom rather than impulse. You can consciously choose a sattva-driven actions like kindness, discipline, knowledge, leading to a balanced life. We can consciously choose that. And that is verse 28. Right? So that, I think we're out of time. Wow, we're about out of time. see what the board here says. Andrew's RMR just says, your intentions bring you to the now. In that moment, your soul and mind are in sync, but it usually only happens at seconds at a time. The rest of the time, our four instincts, sleeping, eating, mating, defending, are running on autopilot, but bringing intention back to the moment turns off autopilot. Yeah. That intention is so important. Would anyone else like to share anything before we end for the day? Thoughts, reflections, realizations? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. It's a great reminder for me this week of these modes. It's funny when I sat down last night to prepare for this and was like, oh, wow, okay, I've been angry all day. So thank you all. And hopefully I'll see you on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.